You're listening to Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick in association with Wexford Insurances. Challenge us at Wexford Insurances 0818 31 30 30.
I'm now joined by Sam McCauley. Sam, your father was a pharmacist in Enniscorthy, so maybe it was inevitable that you would follow in his footsteps.
Well, I suppose my father was looking for a line of succession, so it was going to be one of seven, and I happened to be the one who went into pharmacy.
Following your qualification, what did you do next?
Well, I qualified in early 70s. I did my pre-reg in Limerick and went to work in Dungarvan for 6 months. And bear in mind, like in the early 70s, the Irish economy was slow to backwards. Nothing worked. For instance, like the phone systems, nothing worked. Maureen Potter, a comedian, used to say, if you put your nose around the corner, somebody would pick it. There were so many strikes in the country. So that was the Ireland I was in, and after about 6 months in a very slow-moving kind of business environment, I thought, well, there's more to life than this, and I just said, as kids now go to Australia, I said, well, I'll go someplace for a couple of years. Ended up in Canada about 6 weeks later. So
how different was Canada to Ireland?
Well, immensely different, and for instance, the road systems and whatever, really, it was like you'd pluck the straws off your back. Like you kind of, Ireland looked so backward in contrast when you saw the huge spaghetti junctions, the huge cars and whatever. And bear in mind, this is the first time that I'd been in North America. So it was just a different environment altogether.
So at that stage in Canada, Sam, were pharmacies 10 to 15 years ahead of Ireland?
Oh yeah, the pharmacies were very much like probably the same difference as between the typical family grocer and a supermarket. They much larger shopping environments, much larger range of product and choice, and much larger floor plate in terms of retail space.
So you arrived back from Canada in 1978 and you wanted to replicate that model back in Ireland, is that true?
Yeah, and I'd say, look, even before I went, I could always have that vision of that model that really you got offered the consumer range and choice and a shopping environment that is as much entertainment as business.
When you did come back, did your father have the same ambition for the business as yourself?
No, my father was a terrific man, and look, he built a very, very good business from a real commitment to customer service, which he really created that DNA and whatever that I hope I've replicated through our own business. But in terms of being progressive, no, as I said. If he talked about kind of something, I'd say, well, we bring in a filing cabinet. He'd sort of say, well, what did you want that for? So if you talked about computerization, well, this was kind of a different world altogether. So we ended up with a very amicable buyout of the pharmacy in 1983, and we're both very happy and both great friends for the rest of his life, which was for a long time after that.
So once the ownership transferred to your own name, what did you do next in relation to making the relevant changes to the business?
Well, you were able to invest substantially in the business and grow the business. So we had maximised the floor plate in the business. We moved upstairs onto the first floor. Not to be recommended, really. First floor retailing is very difficult to make work. But we expanded into to prestige cosmetics and cosmetics and jewellery and accessories, beauty salons and whatever. So we were sort of, as I say, differentiating ourselves in terms of range, product, service and how we delivered that service.
So back in 1978, you started with one shop. You're now at a stage where you have 28 stores across the country. Was there a strategic long-term plan that you had for the business back then? No,
like most entrepreneurs, you just keep on doing. I think I said, Henry Ford said, the man who sets out to make a fortune often ends in the poorhouse. But in his case, that fortune was a byproduct. The man who keeps on doing won't go unpaid, and I suppose that's the way things happened with me. We opened our second store in Redmond Square in 1991. terrific young Wexford pharmacists manage the store for me, Patrick McCormick and Eric Jenkins. Patrick is currently our managing director, and really he's responsible for the day-to-day operations of the business. But when they had been working for us for 3 years, for me for 3 years, we got on very well. We used to have a saying like 3 heads were better than 2, better than 1. And we saw business in the same light. The business model was very successful. As I said, when we went into Redmond Square, we really broke the mould on how pharmacy was done in terms of scale and size, range of products and services. And we said, look, we can replicate this model and grow a group of businesses. And they took some equity in the business, and we never looked back from there.
And is that a concept then that you replicated across the country with giving the pharmacist equity in the store that they managed?
It was initially, and then it got cumbersome, and then we split it up, and it went to a point where we created a valuation on the business and a share price, and worked internally, and that was fine. But it was difficulty when the valuation of pharmacies went down. But that's another story.
I want to fast forward now up until, let's say, 2008. The recession kicked in. What type of an effect did that have on your business at that stage?
It was kind of first of all, you thought it was just going to be a short-term thing, right? And you thought maybe 1 or 2 years in restoring the value of the company. But we were getting a double whammy. We were having, first of all, a major drop in consumer spending, the same as every retailer in the country. But equally, the government really targeted pharmacy for cuts, and I'm not saying that there wasn't some opportunity to do that, but they really enacted this legislation called FEMPI. It is called Emergency Powers Legislation, effectively to decide how much they'll pay pharmacists, and our contracts weren't worth the paper they were written on.
So at that stage, what did you do to respond to those changes?
Well, you had to control your costs. You had to continue to be innovative. You had to look for new revenue streams. For instance, we recently started a new agency and distribution business. We're developing our e-commerce platform. We, invested heavily in a new IT platform so that we're getting much more efficient in terms of the level of stocks we keep. The slow-moving stocks are moved off the shelves, and we know where our profit centres are. You just had to become more efficient.
And in that respect, I suppose, I'm wondering how much of a role did technology play in your business over the last couple of years?
Well, technology is an essential ingredient. For instance, in some of our dispensaries now, we have robotic dispensing, which where effectively you type in the prescription details and you get a labelled prescription delivered by the robot directly, and equally the robot is able to handle the incoming stock, just put it in a hopper and it places it on the shelves and whatever. So that kind of technology is an inevitability, because people are just going to have to get more efficient and try and keep costs down.
I know from speaking to lots of local business owners across County Wexford that they're very, very critical of the UK multiples coming into this country, onto their own high streets and, I suppose, accommodating premises next door to them. What are your thoughts on UK multiples? And I suppose more recently, companies and pharmacists going into the likes of some of the multiple supermarkets?
Well, look, you just got to be nimble at what you do, and you got to differentiate yourself, offer a unique range of products and services, and do things that they can't do. But look, you just got to face the realities of life. It's called, disruptive innovation.
In relation to, the footprint that some McCauley Chemists have across the country now, at this stage is huge. You must have entered into lease agreements across the country during the boom times at very, very high rents. How have you managed those?
Well, that's something that we backed off at an early stage. There was a time where we were probably seen as the most innovative pharmacy operator in the country, and we used to get first refusal on new shopping centres because the property developers saw us as a benefit in building footfall in their centres. But then it got to a point where they were putting the same space. They would ask you what space you wanted, and then they'd put it out to tender. And there was a huge kind of move for consolidation in the sector. People were very acquisitive, trying to get new outlets. But we just did the numbers, did the projections, and if it didn't make sense, we didn't go into them. So consequently, we didn't get into any of those really ridiculously high leases.
Well, good news for that. Just in relation to the next couple of years to your business, what do you identify as some of the threats and challenges open to you?
Look, there's first of all, you'd be very, very hopeful of a turnaround in the economy, and there is a slight, and I don't want to sort of jump the gun here, there is a slight emergence of green shoots at this point, so you would be very hopeful that that's going to continue. But I think on the other hand, we have more government cuts to look at in terms of the remuneration paid to pharmacies. So it's going to be tough, and you're just going to have to be better at what you do. And as I say, diversify your revenue streams.
I'm sure there's lots of small business owners listening to this morning's show that have a product that they'd love to have on the shelves across the country and the Sam McCauley Chemist shops. What would you say to them in terms of providing them with advice on how they could go about getting that product onto your shelf?
Well, we're in a business that carries probably about 70,000 products. So the notion that you can selectively promote a product or any one product to the exclusion of others, if the consumer wants a particular product. So the best thing they can do is create consumer demand. And there was one lady in there, Fiona, who does Wild About Foods, and she talked about guerrilla marketing and all of the free publicity she got for her product from getting interviewed in national radio and whatever, and equally in the difference in the product. But essentially the supplier has to create consumer demand, or it's very difficult to justify placing a product on a shelf that's just going to be gather dust.
So in a nutshell, what you're saying is that enough of consumers have to ask at the counter for a specific product before it will actually reach the shelf.
To a large degree, unless it has an absolute unique selling point where you see as a pharmacist or as a retailer that it has unique advantages over other products where you would selectively promote it.
I'm just wondering, just based on that, what the attrition rate is on products that do, and I suppose on top of that, what their shelf life is on average.
Huge failure rate, in terms of new products to market. And, as a rule, you'll sort of wait for a product to have sort of created a niche for itself before committing yourself to placing it on your shelves right across the group.
And to reduce, again, I suppose, your overall dependency on state funding through medical cards and everything else, you've recently set up a distribution business. Tell me a little bit about that. Yeah,
well, we could see the writing on the wall in terms of that we're just going to, suffer a continuous erosion in terms of the remuneration for the government spending on medicines, and one can understand where they're coming from in this economic environment. So we set about getting away from that dependency, and we looked and went to international trade markets across the world. My managing director and my own son, who's managing director of the agency distribution company, have just come back from Taiwan a week ago. They were in Amsterdam today, but they were. You find out the best products, and you say that the consumers will want.
Is it true to say that the pharmacy market is well saturated and oversupplied in this country?
Absolutely, it is. And I think that there's no doubt there has to be a shakeout in the market. There has been a proliferation of pharmacies when there's a downturn, when there's a cut in government expenditure. Some of it driven by low property prices at the moment, low entry costs and whatever. But there comes a time where all of that will change, low interest rates and whatever. And when that environment changes, look, if there's oversupply, it'll be survival of the fittest. And don't get me wrong, there is always room for really good independent operators who are really customer focused and do a fantastic job.
But they're probably more suited to the community market than the retail space within a shopping centre or high street.
Yes, indeed. Well, whatever. Yeah, I would agree with you, and maybe more community-based areas and whatever. But we're kind of very keen on that kind of operation too. And no retailer is passing up anything. If you see Tesco now, they're coming back onto the high street with small service shops, and so you've. Like, it's a competitive market, and you just got to exploit the best opportunities anywhere you find them.
My final question for you, Sam, the plan for the next 5 years for Sam McCauley Group?
Well, the plan is to consolidate at the moment, because unless there is a real gilt-edged opportunity out there, particularly in the retail space, but in a market that's oversupplied, I think unless you get a very unique opportunity, you're much more selective about what you'll take on. But on the other hand, we will look at the agency distribution side of the business. We're developing our e-commerce platform, which we expect that will look at markets not just in Ireland but abroad.
You're listening to Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick in association with Wexford Insurances. Think Wexford Insurances for your business insurance.